Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Friday, October the 29th, 2021. It is currently 4:16 p.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the very empty sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church, located right here in Ovalo, Texas. And I want to stress the very empty sanctuary, all right? Because I think this is a very important point to try to lay the foundation for what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about something that I hate talking about, something that I have tried not to talk. I've done everything in my power not to talk about it as much as possible as a pastor or even as a theological Christian podcaster, because I hate the subject, because I know that anytime I talk about this subject, anytime I talk about it, I know that it in many ways could not only be understood to be self-serving, that in many ways it is very self-serving. That in other words, I understand that by talking about this subject, I could benefit from it. So I'm just going to say that right up front, that I understand that any time any pastor, anyone in ministry talks about what we're getting ready to talk about, we can try to make it sound as spiritually as we can. We can try to make it sound as theological. We can try to and biblical. But the reality is that we benefit from it in some way, shape, or form. So it comes across as being very self-serving, and I don't like that. I want to just be very upfront that I understand that, but we still have to talk about it. All right. So here I am in an empty sanctuary. Now, let me explain something. This is just a reality. So let's start with a reality, all right? Let's start with a reality. I'm sitting in an empty sanctuary. If this sanctuary is always empty, in other words, people don't show up here, and right behind me is the offering baskets. Now, we don't pass the offering baskets in this church. They just sit here in the back, and sometimes I will say, if you have an offering, place it in the back. I don't even know when the last time I mentioned that. Usually, I don't even mention it. Sometimes I will mention it, but they're back here. Now, if the sanctuary is empty, in other words, people don't walk through the door, and if people don't place an offering in those baskets, then let me explain what happens. This church goes away, because like it or not, this may sound carnal, it may sound fleshly, but it's just the reality. Every church requires a certain level of money coming in, or you can't pay for things like, I don't know, see, I'm looking up here, electricity. I don't know. We wouldn't have an internet connection being able to do live broadcasting. We wouldn't be able to pay for anything, right? We wouldn't be able to, the building wouldn't be able to be maintained. So a certain level of money has to come in, or the church ceases to exist. That's just the reality. Right? People can argue all day about the tithe, no tithe, should they tithe. You can have that argument all day. When it gets down, and just to simplify it, no money, no church. No money, no ministry. No money, no building. No money, no electricity. No money. Now I'll move it from a church to what I'm doing. Well, for example, if money doesn't come into this church, since this podcast is, a part of the ministry of Victory Baptist Church, so it's part of that. It's not just, on its own, it's connected to this church. If the money doesn't come into this church, this podcast doesn't exist. Because for me to be live right now on the air, first of all, requires high-speed internet connection, right? So that's a monthly cost. Then it requires, obviously, us being on Spreaker so that we can go live, and our podcast has a hosting site that then can be distributed to all the different platforms. That runs us easily over $100 a month. Then we have things like pod pages, so to try to get our content out there and help people find us. We're on other platforms that cost money. So basically, if you add it all up, it's well over $100 a month just to be able to do the podcasting. Forget anything else in the church. If the money doesn't come in, the podcast goes away. It's just that simple. I don't like that truth, but it's just the way it is. There has to be a certain level of money that comes in, or the ministry goes away. That's the reality. Now, with that reality in mind, I want you to just realize, so just state it this way. Here's the reality. No money, very difficult to have any meaningful level of ministry. No money, no church. No money, no ministry. No money, no podcast. No, I mean, it's just, that's the way it ultimately, that's just a reality to it because everything costs. I'm talking into a microphone that cost over $100. Right here next to me is a laptop. We got the most affordable one we could. I think it was around $500 or $600. So you talk about doing a podcast for as little money as possible. That's us. There's no producer. There's no writer. It's just me right here. Okay. That's what we have. But that's the way it works. And we can talk about it, but just to keep the reality in place, because I don't want to branch out into other ideas right now. To me, very simple reality. No money, no ministry. That's the hardcore reality. But there is another reality. So that's one reality. Here's a second reality. All right? Here's a second reality. And let me go to the news story. This was published today, Friday, October the 29th, 2021. Here is another reality. So reality is no money, no ministry. And here's another reality. Only 13% of evangelicals tithe. Half give away less than 1% of their income annually, according to a study. Only 13% of evangelicals tithe, half give away less than 1% of income annually, according to a study. Now, we could get into a whole debate. I know some Christians believe in tithing. Some Christians reject the Old Testament tithe. I'm not here to get into that debate right now because, again, that to me just distracts from the reality. No money, no ministry. So you've got, when you look at Christianity, only 13% of evangelicals tithe and half give away less than 1% of their income annually. Well, what does that mean for ministry? What does that mean? What does that say? Now, this is very important. What does that say about Christians' commitment to those ministries? A lot of Christians benefit from ministry. A lot of them don't want to support the ministry with their money. A lot of Christians have no problem benefiting from a ministry, right? Okay. Oh, I love the sermons from that church. And they will listen. And they grow and they benefit and praise God. Ministry they should never charge for ministry. I'm completely against all ministries and all Christian podcasts who put content behind paywalls. And I've seen more and more and more of that where, hey, we'll give you 30 minutes of our podcast, but the rest of it's on our Patreon page. Become a monthly subscriber. And wait, if you increase your subscription, you can get this and you can get this. Ministries should never charge anyone for the preaching of God's word. That's why I hate Christian conferences, et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line is, if Christians aren't supporting those ministries, that demonstrates to some level, hey, I want you to give me, but I'm not willing to support it. I'm not willing to support it. You can put in 900 hours of work and I'm going to benefit, but I'm not going to give you a dime. Sadly, that's the way it works in many cases. I mean, that's a horrible statistic. 13% of evangelicals tithe and half give away less than 1% of income annually. So again, the first reality, no money, no ministry. The second reality, Christians are giving very, very, very little. And then you could ask yourself, what does that say about Christians and their commitment to ministry? Now, let's read a little bit of this story. While a majority of evangelicals say tithing, giving 10% of one's income to the church is a biblical commandment, only an estimated 13% engage in the practice. So a majority say, hey, tithing is biblical. It's something you're supposed to do. But when you really get down to it, only 13% engage in the actual practice. Okay. I love when people if I've ever said anything about tithing, and sometimes people will get upset about, well, I disagree with you. And I'm like, okay, well, instead of disagreeing, then the question is, what are you doing? Look, even if you completely disagree and say tithing isn't biblical, you can't tell me that giving is not a biblical principle, because clearly it is. And if you want to argue that tithing is biblical, then are you practicing it? So even if you denied tithing, you're still commanded to give in the New Testament. There's no way around that because, again, the reality, no money, no ministry. right? So instead of fighting about it, then what people need to be doing is do less fighting and actual giving, either the 10% that if you believe in tithing, or the other perspective is you don't give a tithe, you give in a different way. We'll talk about that principle later. Are you giving? In other words, it's one thing to debate the theology of it, but if you're not actually giving, it doesn't really matter if you have a perspective and you debate the perspective. Are you actually giving and supporting ministry? And if you're not, well, then that's the focus. So a majority of evangelicals say tithing, giving 10% of one's income, is a biblical commandment. Only an estimated 13% actually engage in the practice, while half give away less than 1% of their income annually, a new study shows. The study, The Generosity Factor, Evangelicals and Giving, will be formally released on November the 1st. It reflects data collected from American evangelical Protestants and highlights how and where evangelicals give money. It also reveals significant differences in giving among age groups. Now, I'm just going to stop and ask a question. Do you believe, from a biblical perspective, that Christians should be the most generous and giving people, or do you believe Christianity should have nothing to say and has nothing to do with giving and generosity? Now, if we say yes, Christian, because Christianity is based off God gave his only begotten Son to us. Freely, we have received the great gift of salvation. Did not cost us anything. It cost him. Freely, we've received that. So because of receiving such generosity from God by giving his only begotten Son, should we not then be motivated to freely give to others and be very generous? And even forget generosity. Shouldn't we be committed to ministry? Shouldn't we be committed to supporting those ministries that feed and teach and equip and challenge? I mean, I'm not trying to tell you anything. I'm just asking questions to try to get you to think and for you to look at yourself. So they did this study. It's going to be released on November the 1st, and it reflects data collected from American evangelical Protestants and highlights how and where evangelicals give money. It also reveals the significant differences in giving among age groups. If I said different groups, among age groups. The research from, and they named the different places that were involved in all of the collecting the data and everything else. It says, we calculate average giving for all evangelicals, including those who give nothing. This is a more complete picture of American evangelicals. Among them, the average is 2.4% of income to church and 0.8% to charity, for a total of 3.2% of household income going to church or charity, the researchers said. When the data was broken down beyond averages, while researchers noted are usually inflated by a few people providing large numbers, the picture on giving among evangelicals was even more grim. So when you really break it down, because you always have certain individuals who are doing most of the giving, right? So when you really break it down, they're saying the data is very grim and it's not painting a very good picture. Now, again, I want you to ask yourself, what does it reveal? Does it reveal people's commitment to ministry? Does it demonstrate a lack of generosity? Does it demonstrate selfishness? What does it demonstrate? You can tell me. You can let me know what you think, because I definitely want to hear everyone's perspective here. The median for church giving is 0.57%. So the median for church giving is 0.57%. Yes, that's just over 0.5%. While for charitable giving, it's 0.1% or 0.1%. Total giving to church and charity combined shows a median figure of exactly 1%. Think about that figure for a moment. Half of all American evangelical Protestants give less than 1% of their household income to church or charity, they said. That would demonstrate that Christians are not very generous. that Christians are not very giving, at least when it comes to giving to charity and to the church. Now, they may demonstrate generosity in some other way, but at least in this way that's been measured, it doesn't look good. And then the question is, how will churches survive? How will ministries survive? I mean, everyone has to ask that question. We're a little small church in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes, according to all recent studies, little churches in the middle of nowhere are not going to survive. There's lots of discussions about how medium-sized churches are going to survive. I don't know how my church ultimately survives in the long term. I don't know. I just have to trust God. But I know this, if we don't have money, all of it goes away. There's no podcast. There's nothing. It goes away in some way, shape, or form because it costs. Those are some bad numbers. Okay. The study found that the average evangelical gave $1,923 to the church and $622 to charity over the past 12 months. The average evangelical gave $1,923 to the church. Now, some churches can't survive. Some churches can't survive with that little of money coming in. There's no way they can. Now, a lot of those churches have big programs, and you could ask yourself that they built up a little mini kingdom that they cannot support financially. Now, at a little small church like ours, we've been able to survive. One, the church was able to survive at the beginning because I did not take a dime of money from the church in any way, shape, or form. Then later on, the church wanted to do something, so they make my house payment. Now, if the church cannot make my house payment, well, then I have to go back to being a bivocational, which then basically is going to wipe out the Theology Central podcast because I've been there, done that, trying to be a bivocational pastor and trying to maintain a podcast. That was absolutely detrimental to all sanity. So it would be the end. So again, I'm going to go back to that reality. No money, no ministry. It's just the way it works. And I hate that. I wish it wasn't the case, but there's just a harsh, fleshly reality. And everyone who's not in ministry, you know that reality, right? No money, no house. No money, no food. No money, no car. No money, no insurance. No money. You know how that works. And it's the same way for ministry. I wish it wasn't. I wish there was just, angels just drop down money at the door of the church. I pulled up in the parking lot of the church, and it'd have been great if there should have been a basket saying, your daily allowance brought to you from heaven. And I opened it up and go, oh, there you go. There's my house payment. There's covering for the podcast that keeps the church going. All right, we're good to go. We're good to go. We're good to go. But it's not there. It's not there. It's just not there. Of course, these figures include, I'll read this whole paragraph again. The study found that the average evangelical gave $1,923 to the church and $622 to charity over the past 12 months for a total of $2,545 in giving. At the median mark, however, evangelicals only gave $340 to the church and $50 to charity for a total of $390. So when you really break it down at the median mark, then they're only giving $340 to the church. Man, that's a 12-month. The median at 12 months, the average. So they gave $340 to the church. That churches can't survive on that. That's crazy. Of course, these figures include many evangelicals who gave nothing at all. If we just consider those who donate to the church, the average church giving is $2,000 with a median of $800. And if we just consider the charitable donors, the average is $1,000 given to charities, while the median of $300. The study found that people were more engaged with their church. Though the study found that people who were more engaged with their church and faith tended to give more to their church and vice versa. Well, that makes sense. If someone is involved in the church, hopefully they're supporting it. Hopefully, they're benefiting from it, and hopefully they're supporting it. Now, we could go through all of this study. It's somewhat, I'm not going to say it's super lengthy, but you can find the article at the christianpost.com. Again, the title of the article is Only 13% of Evangelicals Tithe. Half give away less than 1% of income annually, according to the study. You can read it. You can tell me whether you agree with the study, disagree with the study. You can tell me what you've seen, what you witnessed, or you can just tell me your struggle with giving. Now, sometimes people struggle with giving is financial, and I understand that. But sometimes people struggle for a lot of other reasons. So here's what I want to do. There's the realities. The reality is no money, no ministry. The reality is Christians are giving less and less and less and less and less to churches, and it's going to be a major problem at some point. What I want to do is now look, there's the reality. I want to look at the spiritual, I'm going to call this the spiritual reason for giving. And then I'm going to look at some biblical principles of giving. So we have the reality. The reality is no money, no ministry. The reality is Christians are giving very, very, very little money to churches. And that could be very detrimental moving forward. And when you look at some of the economic issues going on in our country, it could even get worse. And I don't know how it's going to play out, but we could be looking for a period of something really, really bad for many ministries. But I want to look at the spiritual idea behind giving, right? Because a lot of times we understand, let me try to explain it this way. I think we all understand the fleshly reason for giving, right? There's a very fleshly reason for giving. You don't give, there's no ministry. That's very fleshly, very just economic. But there's spiritual reasons behind it that I think are often overlooked. And I'm going to go to the basis, the absolute basic principle for giving, to me, is found in Matthew chapter 16. Now, I don't know if everyone will agree with this, but I'm going to give you kind of my theological perspective on this subject. It's Matthew chapter 16. Matthew chapter 16. Matthew 16. I really do believe this is the biblical basis for it. I really do. I know. Well, you can tell me whether you agree or disagree. Matthew chapter 16. Then said Jesus unto his disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Following Christ as a disciple involves these three things. Denial of self, taking up a cross, dying to self, and following him. The very essence of a disciple to follow Christ is to deny yourself and die to yourself. Now, giving is listen to me, I believe giving is the very tool used to try to bring about this. Think of giving almost as the if I can speak correctly, as the gym, there we go, as the gym where you work this out. What do I mean by that? Well, right down here at the end of the table, I don't have my wallet in my pocket, but at the end of the table, I can see my wallet laying down there. Now, if I was to pick up my wallet, I don't know how much money. Oh, I know, I've got a little bit of money in my wallet because someone in my church, for pastor appreciation, they gave me a financial gift. And I was very appreciative, and I'm going to use it to buy some notebooks and some pencils, all right? So I was very appreciative. They gave me a card and a little gift, and just saying thank you for your ministry. And it meant a lot to me. We don't, as this church, we don't do a big thing about Pastor Appreciation Month or Clergy Appreciation. Someone else sent me a note saying thank you for your ministry, and I do appreciate that. We don't do a big thing in the church or anything like that. So it's just if an individual family wants to do something, then they do something. So now that money is in my wallet, right? That's in my wallet. Now I'll make it very clear. I have plans what I want to do with it. I want to go to Office Depot and I want to buy some notebooks and pencils because I love notebooks and pencils. Now, of course, they're going to be used obviously for ministry, for Bible study. It's going to be used for that, but that's what I'm probably going to do with the financial gift that I received, and I'm very grateful for it. But if I take that money and I give it to a ministry or I give it to the church, now guess what? It has to be involved. Denying of self. Because what I want to do is going to be denied to do something else with it. Giving is the gym, right? It's the gymnasium, if I can say the word correctly, where you work out this denying yourself. To deny self is not something that's just accomplished because you're like, okay, I'm going to deny myself. You have to be placed in a situation where you have to work it out. God places giving there to work this reality in. Giving is the very first thing that helps lead to you denying yourself. When you're sitting there in a pew or you're sitting there at home and you're listening to a podcast and you decide to support that podcast or that ministry, well, you're giving money that you could use for you. You could spend it on you for a nice dinner out or whatever you like or the things you want. You could do that for you. When you send it, donate it, give it, put it in an offering plate, whatever ministry you support, you are denying yourself. So it's a part of Christian growth and discipleship. You have to die to self in a sense. There's a momentary time of dying there. It's short-lived, but it happens. Because I'm like, self wants money. I'm giving the money. I just died to myself a little bit. And then, of course, you're following Christ and you're not following yourself because you're like, ministry is more important than what I want. Ministry is more important than what I desire. So in a way, you are accomplishing all three things when you give. There is the spiritual reason for giving is the way we exercise the discipline of denying self, dying to self, and following him. Is that a better way of stating it? It's the gym where we work it out. It's the CrossFit. It's the CrossFit place where we work it out. It's the track where you run to work it out. You have to deny yourself. You have to die to self. That is the whole essence of your Christian life. And giving is what it hits right here because look, you may not be greedy. You may not even be covetous in any major way, but you know that when you have money, you immediately start thinking of what you want to do, or you may even start thinking of things you feel you need to do. But when you give it away, you're denying self, you're dying to self, you're following something other than yourself. You're saying that this is a greater priority than me. This is a greater priority than my wants. And it's not always easy. I remember I became a Christian as a teenager and trying to take any money that I had to give it. I was like, I don't really know about this. I don't really know if I like this idea. Okay. Which was the whole point of giving. It's spiritual. And I think it's fascinating from a theological perspective that Genesis 3, you have the fall, right? Now, man, after the fall, now everyone's going to inherit a sinful nature. Everyone's going to be born a sinner, right? And the very essence of sin is the exaltation of the I. The very essence of sin is the exaltation of self. And I say the exaltation of the I because, well, sin, S-I-N. Okay, you get the idea. It's like I is the middle letter of sin. And that's really the essence of sin. The essence of sin is I. It's idolatry of self. It's the exaltation of self. Well, I find it fascinating that Genesis 3, we have the fall. Now the sinful nature is going to be present. And then immediately in Genesis chapter 4, I think we find, in a sense, one of the things God gives us to fight the sinful nature. And I think the thing he gives us to fight the sinful nature, and I'm going to say he gives us the situation of giving. What do I mean by that? Look in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. And Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. Now, Cain is born, obviously, with a sinful nature. He's dead in his trespass and sin. He has a depraved nature. And she again bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. Now, this seems to indicate that this was the way it was set up. Hey, there's a certain time you're going to bring an offering unto the Lord. And they had to take things that they worked for, things they grew, things that they were involved in, things that they could have used for self, and they were to give it to God. Not because God needed it, but God placed the system of giving to combat the sinful nature. the Christian life is a constant struggle of fighting against self. Giving is the very place where we work. It's the arena where we battle self. I'm trying to think of every illustration I can to get this point across, right? The idea of a gym, working out, CrossFit gym, wherever you can think of, the arena where you're battling. Giving is you're battling self. They work. They raise the animals, plant and harvest the crops, whatever the case may be, and then you've got to give it back to God. You've got to give something back to God. That goes against self. Self doesn't want to give anything to God. Self wants to keep it for the God of self. The only God we want things to be used for and given to is self. I know that. I know that about me. Maybe you're different, but I know about me, I like to get, right? Now you can say, oh, I love to give. Maybe you're very spiritual, but let me just say, the giving though, ultimately, it's spiritual reason. I know there's a fleshly reason, right? Because no ministry, no money, no ministry, but there's a spiritual reason. The very essence of giving is to fight self. The very essence of giving is there to help you deny self, die to self, and follow something other than yourself. I think that's very important. Now, we have two very key passages in the New Testament. The first one is 1 Corinthians chapter 16. 1 Corinthians chapter 16. All right, 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 1. Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given order to the churches of Galatia, even so do ye. Upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay upon him in store as God hath prospered him, that there be no gathering when I come. Now, some people say this is not a rule about how it should be done in churches. This was a special rule given to these churches for collecting for a specific purpose. You can get all day on how people want to interpret this, but it does lay down some basic principles, all right? Now, it says on the first day of the week, so the way we've always done it in church, and in my church, is we don't pass the collection plate, but if I'm going to mention a collection, I do it on Sunday morning, and then that's it. I don't mention it on a Wednesday. We don't talk about it on a Wednesday, because I just say Sunday would be the first day of the week, and that's when we should do so, just based off the principle, all right? Let every one of you lay by him in store as God hath prospered him. Now, the principle seems to be that you give as you have prospered. Now, I know some people say you got to go with the 10%. 10% is a great place to start. I'm not here to get into a debate about the tithe, because then if we get into a debate about the tithe, everyone misses the overall point here. The main reason you give is because it's the arena where you're fighting self. There's a spiritual reason to give. There's another reason to give, and that's the fleshly reason, which we've already indicated, because ministry cannot happen without it. But the principle here is you give as you have been prospered. That means some people can give more. Some people are going to give less. But you need to give as based off what you can give. I mean, everyone knows what they can. Now, we can always convince ourselves that we can't give. But as you are prospering and things are better for you, then you give. You may be giving more than others. But that's the way it has to work as you have prospered. I think that's a basic principle here. All right. And then lay up him in store as God hath prospered him, that there be no gathering when I come. Now, it seems to be the idea is, hey, this should be just a normal practice, so that or they should start practicing it now, that when he shows up, there won't have to be any special gathering. But the bottom line is that give as you have prospered, as you have been prospered. You know what God has done for you. You know how you have prospered in different ways. Your giving should be somewhat related to that in some way, shape, or form. Now, that I know some people don't like that. They're like, I need a number. I need a percentage. Well, you can always start with the 10%. You can. But I think in the New Testament, the idea is not just giving the 10%. You give as need. What is the need? What is the need? And as you see the need, you look at how you have prospered and you give accordingly. I think that that's more of the New Testament idea. You also have 2 Corinthians chapter 9. And we could have taken that passage apart a little bit more, but I'm just giving you basic verses here. 2 Corinthians chapter 9. And we read this. 2 Corinthians 9:7, every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give. Now, that first idea is as God has prospered you. Second, as you purpose in your heart. It seems to be the idea that you're not giving because someone has manipulated you, someone has tricked you, someone has threatened you, but you give as you have purposed in your heart. Now, what should be the driving motivation for your purpose in giving? I think your purpose in giving should be to benefit from the spiritual exercise of denying yourself, dying to yourself, and following something other than yourself. And I think the other thing that should be purposed, that should give you, the reason, and as you've purposed in your heart, the reason you've come up with in your heart, the first reason should be the spiritual benefit. The second reason should be the nature of the need, right? I think that's important. And the third, I think, very important principle about why, what should give you this reason in your heart should be the benefit you have received spiritually from the ministry. Who's feeding you spiritually? Who's equipping you? Who's challenging you? Who's really helping you spiritually? That's got to come into play, right? Because this is as you've purposed in your heart, as you have decided, not because someone manipulated or tricked you. And what's that purpose? I think the first motivating purpose should be the spiritual benefit. It's going to help you deny yourself, die to yourself, and not follow yourself. I think that's very important. Another thing is, what's the need? What's the need? If it's a small ministry, you can be guaranteed there's a need. If it's a gigantic ministry, then you may not perceive the need in the same way. So what is the need? And then third, where have you benefited spiritually? And then fourth, how committed are you to ministry advancing and continuing? I think there's a lot of things that can give you that purpose. Right? So I'm just going to say those one more time. What, as you purpose in your heart, what should be the motivating purpose? And number one, the spiritual benefit that comes from giving. I think I cannot stress that enough. All right, that's important. Number two, the need. What is the need? Number three, the spiritual benefit you have received from that ministry. And number four, how committed are you to seeing that ministry continue and advance and grow and move forward? How committed are you to helping that ministry do more? Look, you can only do as a ministry what you have money to do. You can't do any more. A lot of times people say, well, you need to do this and well, give me the money and I'll do this. I'll just give you an example. Book giveaways. We were able to give a lot of books away because, well, someone stepped up and helped us be able to give those books away. So they, in a sense, helped us do more ministry and helped more people by getting books to more people. That's the way it works. It's just that simple, right? So this 2 Corinthians 9:7, every man according as he purposed in his heart. What's that? What's giving you that motivation? What's giving you that purpose, that reason, that desire to do so? And I've given you some concepts there. Let him not give grudgingly. You don't want anyone to ever give grudgingly. If they don't want to give, you don't ever want to manipulate or try to beat someone over the head to make them give. That's why I don't plead. I don't beg. I don't mention it in the church. I mean, the offering is there. I don't try to do anything about it. I hope that the study of God's word will motivate people to give. I hope all the work I put into ministry will motivate someone to give. I do. I do. But I'm not going to try to make someone do it grudgingly. Or of necessity. You shouldn't be motivated even by necessity. For God loveth a cheerful giver. You should give cheerfully. You should give willingly. And I think those are some basic principles from the New Testament. I know there's more scriptures that we could break down. I know that we could. I do believe it's a principle that as you see a need, you give, as you have been prospered, right? Some can give more, some can give less. Everyone can give some. Let me give you an example. And this is crazy. I kind of tried to get people to do this in this church at one time. I kind of threw out the idea. It was somewhat successful, and then everyone kind of just stopped, and I stopped mentioning it because I did witness this in a church in Nebraska. They were meeting in an old movie theater, right? Old movie theater. It was nothing nice about the building, nothing great about the building. And I'm talking an old movie theater, like, one screen, old fashioned kind of movie theater, even with those old fashioned seats that they had in those old fashioned movie theaters. So not like some, they had a movie theater, not like a big movie theater, a modern day movie theater. This is probably something from the 1950s or the 1960s. Okay. It was an old building, and that's where they were meeting. And they wanted at some point to build a new building, but they didn't want to go in debt. So what they did is they basically told everyone, bring your spare change. Just bring your spare change. And they gave them these little boxes that you could put your spare change in. Just bring spare change. And they basically came up with enough money. It took like 3-4 years. It took a long time of just basically, for the most part, people's spare change. They ultimately got them close enough to be able to break the ground and start the building process. I don't think they had to go in debt. And then there was obviously there was additional giving and just the normal money that came in, but the spare change really did so, which just demonstrates that everyone can give something. Everyone can give something. Not everyone can give 1,000. Not everyone can give 500, but everyone can give something. And if everyone gave something, ministries would be stronger. If everyone gave something, I've said it so many times. Yes, we do have a donate tab on Theology Central pod page, theologycentral.net. We do have a donate tab. I don't mention it a lot. Sometimes I mention it because I'll get people emailing me going, how do I give? Send a check. Who do I send a check to? And sometimes I'm like, look, if you want to give it that way, it's simple. I've said it before. I don't care if someone gives $1, if someone gives $5, someone gives $10. Every cent counts, because if everyone gives a little bit, well, then there's not even an issue. But when people don't give, and even that study mentioned that a lot of people don't give anything. They don't even give a dime. But I'm telling you, a lot of those people who don't give a dime still want that ministry. They still want it to be there. They still want to benefit from it. They still want to reap the benefits from it. Now, I understand we live in a time where a lot of people are struggling financially, especially coming through the pandemic and everything. Nobody should feel, this is very important, no one should ever feel guilty for not being able to give. No one should ever feel guilty, and they should reap all of the benefits from ministry, right? Someone can't give, they should still reap the same benefits as someone who can give. All right. So because that's why ministry should never be put behind a paywall, right? Just because someone can't give doesn't mean they shouldn't get the full podcast episode. Just because someone can't give doesn't mean they shouldn't be able to get the Bible study exercise curriculum that we make available. Just because someone can't give doesn't mean they shouldn't receive the book giveaways when we do a book giveaway. Just because someone can't give doesn't mean that they can't say, hey, I need a Bible, or I need some Bible study tools. They should be able to receive those. So because they should be able to be ministered to. But what I'm saying is there's plenty of people who may have the ability to give, will reap all of the benefits from a ministry, and then do very little supporting of it. And then if the ministry goes away, they're like, well, I really missed that. Well, you have to kind of support it for it to survive. So those are just some thoughts I wanted to throw out here on this Friday afternoon, fast approaching Friday evening. I know it's not a popular topic. I understand that. I do know that the Christian church has abused the doctrine of giving in horrific and horrible ways. And many have made millions of dollars and built small kingdoms for themselves on the backs of people who gave and gave and gave and gave. And that is horrible and tragic. I know some preachers really preach an idea that if you give, then you're going to get. And I never say that. If you give, I don't ever make any promise of what you're going to get, other than I think there is a spiritual benefit to be had, that you are denying yourself, you're dying to yourself, and you're not following yourself. There's the spiritual benefit. I don't know what else you're going to get from it. And there should be no promise that you're going to get this. I know some people will quote a scripture here or there, but you got to be very careful, because I've seen people who gave so much of money to ministries, and their family stayed basically in poverty, for most of their lives. So don't give some idea that if someone gives, that all of a sudden, the heavens are going to open and those people are going to be wealthy. It doesn't always work that way. because that's just not, I don't think that there's a mathematical formula to that. And even that, if you're giving in order to get some kind of financial, like, hey, if I give 10%, I'm going to get 20%, like it's, you're playing the stock market or you're gambling, then that turns the whole giving thing into not a spiritual exercise, but a fleshly exercise. Giving is a spiritual exercise, primarily with spiritual benefits, because it's the gymnasium. There we have it. See, I said the word right. Gymnasium. It is the gymnasium. Isn't that embarrassing? See, that's why you don't want to give money to me, because you may want to give me money so that I can practice on learning how to pronounce certain words. Right? Gymnasium, where you can work out this spiritual concept. But and just a couple other principles. No one should ever be denied ministry because they don't have money. Ministries should never be charging for ministry. And let me say it again. If there's a conference and you have to pay money to get in, to hear someone preach God's word, that to me is sinful, blasphemous, and wrong. There should never be charging money for people to hear the preaching of God's word, ever. If a pastor is such a celebrity that he can charge people, and he goes through the act of charging people so they can hear him preach, that he should no longer be a celebrity. Go find that nobody somewhere on the internet who'll preach. Go find someone who'll do it for free. I'm sorry. You're like, well, they're the greatest Bible teacher ever. Maybe they are. But if they're charging you to hear them preach, I trust you can find people. Put it this way. I know I went to big schools, Grace University in Omaha, Nebraska, Moody Bible Institute, Trinity Seminary. There's a lot of different seminaries and Bible colleges, and some of the ones that had the bigger names. Ooh, yeah, I'm going to a big school. Yeah, a lot of money spent. Sometimes it's those little Bible institutes that I went to that basically was like, no, we're not going to charge you anything, or you can just give as you can. Some of them I learned far more in those little schools than I did with the big name schools. And it's just, when a pastor's charging you, it's just, something's gone horribly wrong in Christianity when that happens. Right. And we'll be talking about money. I'm not sure I'm going to get to it. I have a podcast episode I want to do in regards to this, famous Christian singer who's on a worship tour, and it talks about they're selling like a VIP experience. Like, you're going to pay money to get into this worship event right there. It's a worship tour. So you're a Christian musician. You want to have a night of worship, but you're charging people to get in. When would the Bible ever create the idea that you charge people to come to a night of worship? There's already problem number one. Problem number two, then they created this idea that, hey, because they're a celebrity and they're super popular, let's give everyone a VIP experience. So if you spend extra money, guess what? You get to meet and greet the worship leader, and you get to get your picture taken, and you can walk on stage, and it's like, what in the world is that? Once again, it shows you the abuse that much of Christianity has done when it comes to the subject of money. And I hate the fact that it's been abused. And I hate that people have been ripped off and hurt by it. I hate the fact that, people out there are being told that if they give money to a ministry, they're going to get a healing, or they're going to get a finance, and they've been lied to and manipulated. I hate all of that. The basic essence is it's a spiritual exercise. It's the spiritual gymnasium where you can work out denying yourself, dying to yourself, and not following yourself. And you should give as you have been prospered and as you purpose in your heart. And the thing that should motivate you, the thing that should motivate your purpose is we've already covered a number of them, but some basic ideas should be there, like where you have spiritually benefited, where are you being fed spiritually as there is a need, right? Some basic concepts there that you need to consider. I'm not going to go back through everything, but some basic concepts there that you need to consider, because I think it's very, very important, right? That Christians really need to think about this, right? What should motivate you is the spiritual benefit that comes from it. That's one of that should be the number one motivating factor, is I'm going to give because of the spiritual benefit that I will receive. I'm fighting against my flesh. That's the first thing that should motivate you. Second, what should motivate you is the need. What is the need? You know, as God has prospered you, you can make that a motivation as well. Where are you spiritually benefiting? What ministry is feeding you? That's what you really have to consider. All right. And well, there's so much more we could talk about there, but I don't want to repeat everything. All right. I hope that was beneficial. I doubt I'm going to get much feedback on this one. I doubt I'm going to get much feedback on this one. And I want you very aware. I know that it could come across as self-serving. I know that. And I'm the first to admit that. The talking about money is a fleshly exercise in some level, in some way, because no ministry, no money. I mean, no money, no ministry. You get the idea. It's just fleshly in that way, but it's just the reality. It's just the reality. I mean, if you have a movie theater in town and nobody goes to the movie theater, well, then your movie theater in your town goes away. Let's say you only have one movie theater. If nobody goes and supports it, it goes away. Look what's happened all across the United States of America at malls. I mean, I lived my life inside a mall. I can't even tell you how much of my life was spent inside walking at a mall, getting dropped off at the mall at like 8 o'clock in the morning before the place even opened, and my parents wouldn't come pick me up till like midnight. I spent all day in the mall, right? I can tell you. Well, guess what? People stopped going to malls. And now look at how many abandoned, closed down malls there are in the United States of America. And then people are like, oh, I missed that. Well, if you don't support it, it doesn't exist. So many times people say, oh, I miss having that. Well, if people don't support it, it goes away. And that's what's going to happen to a lot of ministries and a lot of churches if the giving continues to take that downward spiral where people are giving so very little. I know it's a fleshly topic, but it's one that has to be discussed. And I guess I'm the one who's picking up. I'm going to pick up the subject and at least put it out there. I guess I don't have anything to lose. Put it that way. I guess that's a good thing. I guess. Maybe I have nothing to gain. Maybe I do have something to lose. I could probably gain by doing topics that people would be more appreciative of than one that's probably going to offend a lot of people. And let me just say, if you've been ripped off or manipulated or beat over the head or abused in any way about money in any of your past church experiences, let me apologize on behalf of, pastors and churches everywhere. Let me just say I'm sorry. But just remember, giving is a biblical concept, and it's ultimately there to spiritually benefit you. But if you still hold that grudge and that bitterness, then I would say don't give until you get past that and you can give without doing so grudgingly, and you can do so cheerfully. Because it's very important that you give with the right attitude. It's more important that you give with the right attitude than it's more important how you give than if you give. I really do believe that. I think it's very important. All right. If you have any questions or disagreements, you can email me at newsif@yahoo.com. Newsif@yahoo.com. No one came into the live chat for this topic. So I hope I haven't offended anybody. Well, you know what? I hope I haven't unnecessarily offended anyone. If the subject offended you, I apologize only in the sense that I don't want you to be offended, but it is a very biblical concept that must be discussed and must be considered. I know some of you will be mad that I didn't get into the tithe debate. Look, the New Testament tells you to give. You want to worry about the percentage and try to make sure that you do the math and you only give that 10%. You can do that all day, but just give. That's the main thing. Give as you prosper. Give as you can. Give based off the need. Give in proportion to the amount that you're being spiritually fed. Even throw in that concept, I guess. I don't. There's just so many different things that we could take into account there. But I just think sometimes the fighting over the tithe, people fight over the tithe. The majority of the people who believe in giving a tithe don't even practice it. So what's the point of fighting about the tithe? Let's just try to get people giving. That's the most important thing. Then ministries can survive. All right. I'll stop right there. You can email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Everyone have a great weekend. God bless.